Toss that rusty old grill into the river and set the Barca Lounger on fire. You have now entered the Dadward Spiral. My name is Aaron Pruner, for those of you who are completely clueless and just tuning in for the very first time. My co-host Eddie is out this week, so apologies to Eddie. You can find me at Aaron Flux on Twitter, Aaron W. Pruner on Facebook and Instagram, and at Dadward Spiral, which is this show that you are tuning into. And thanks to Dragon Wagon Radio for giving us a home. This started off as just an idea. I honestly, I was spitballing this show as an idea on Twitter like 3 months ago, and Dax Shepard of all people, I pitched it like, well, I should have Dax Shepard on because, you know, he and I have similar stories about becoming a dad later than a lot of other people. And he's like, I'm there. And it was that tweet that made me start this. And now I can't get a hold of Dax Shepard. So it's now been like, it's now this like ongoing mission. Like every week I'm going to get everyone I love talking to, and I'm just going to keep like emailing his publicist saying, hey, this is really a legit show. And it would not have actually happened if it wasn't for his tweet back to me saying it was a good idea. I hope it's a good idea, man. So for those of you just tuning in who don't really know, this is not your typical dad podcast. I'm not here to talk about sports or fishing, although I'm totally down for my guests to talk about it. I didn't have a dad or a grandfather or a great-grandfather or an uncle or any sort of semblance of a father figure growing up. And I was raised to hate my father, and that sort of transferred into this idea of never wanting to be a dad. The idea scared me, and my wife got pregnant and the dadward spiral commenced. My anxiety lasted almost a good year and a half. And I mean, I can get into that story a bit later, but my wife was in labor for 4 days, which was a whole other experience entirely. And she wanted to go with hypnobirthing, so like no medicine and hypnosis instead. We went to classes. I told her, you know, you have all of my support. It's not something I would do. And then as soon as we got in the hospital, epidural, like it all went differently. But I'm getting off track here. So I said Eddie is not with me this week, but a man who I consider a friend, who started off as just an interview subject of mine at my previous job, has joined me in his place. And I was going to have him on anyways, at least invite him if Eddie was here. His name is Kevin Rahm. And I mean, so the first time I ever spoke to Kevin, I was covering a show called Lethal Weapon at a website that no longer exists, named Zap to It, which is, I guess, kind of poetic given that Lethal Weapon is a TV show that no longer exists. And people's memories fade really quickly when it comes to media or online anything. And I thought, okay, this is a funny guy. And I saw his work on Bates Motel and Mad Men. And then we hung out at a party. I'm like, dude, this guy's fucking weird. He's like on my level. And it was one of the better parties I had ever gone to. It was a Television Critics Association thing. And yeah, we're social media friends. And Kevin, welcome to whatever the hell this is.
Was that the one at the Soho House?
It was the one at a very, very tall building in Hollywood or LA.
Yes, that's Soho. That's Soho House.
It's so disorienting because you get on the elevator and you don't realize you're going to get off on like the 100th floor.
Yeah.
You just go outside and suddenly you're just above everything else. And my vertigo really kicked in the first time I was there. But those things are always so weird because
they're awful.
Because you have the people on TV who are promoting their shows on one side of the room, and all of like the attic people who the majority of my peers, I call them attic people because, no offense, but you see they're kind of schlubby and they don't really have the drive to, I guess, socialize at these events. And usually these events happen after like 12-hour days in a ballroom covering show after show after show. So I'm not saying my peers are a bunch of slobs, but there is this disconnect where they seem to be, and I'm guilty of it too, going to these parties to get the free food and free alcohol and
That's
swag. And but it's I've always every time I'm going to those things and I go up and I actually talk to people on shows who I've interviewed before, I get this weird sort of "why are you over here" sort of reaction, like it's like like it's a school dance and all the boys are on one side and the girls are on the other and the chaperones are like keeping them apart. It's this weird dynamic and it happens every time. But I hung out with you at this party and it was like, oh, this actually kind of feels like a party. And that was one of the things that I really glommed onto, is that you didn't really feel like the stereotypical actor that you meet in this city. And I guess that's the first thing I want to talk to you about.
Hmm.
You don't live in LA.
I don't. Not anymore. We moved. My wife and I moved to Sacramento 7 years ago now.
7 years.
Yeah, it's been that long. I was living in Sacramento when I was doing Lethal Weapon.
Yes, right. You
Yeah.
said that. And you said they flew you down like every week and put you in a hotel or whatever.
They didn't fly me anywhere. They flew me down for the pilot.
Oh.
But then once the show's picked up, it's my dime. So I got an apartment in LA and I would took the Southwest Airbus, once a week. I'd go back and forth at least once a week, sometimes twice a week.
Well,
it's not bad. Honestly, look, it's better than going to New York back and forth from Sacramento.
Right.
So there's one direct flight and it's a red eye. And it's JetBlue without Mint. So you're, crammed in the back of the plane and, but Southwest, I mean, I have friends that lived in like Long Beach and then we'd leave work at the same time on Friday at 5 and I would get to Sacramento before they would get home.
well, yeah.
So it's not that bad. You know what I mean? Like the only downside was, if they changed my schedule and I had to, jump on the last flight out to be there in the morning or something. But otherwise, it's a pleasant problem to have. Trust me.
Well, yeah. And I guess the other reason you left LA is because it's LA. There's a lot of people leaving.
No, actually, I was scared to leave LA. I liked LA. I had found I loved my house. I loved where I lived. I had good friends. I had created, a friend family there that I'm really still very close to with. And we moved simply because my wife has a real job and her job was going to be in Sacramento.
Yeah, if you're cool with talking about that,
Sure.
I do want to talk about that later. But because I write about the entertainment industry, and I guess I could still consider myself an actor, even though I got the ring light and the backdrop, and I got emails from my agents and my managers saying, get ready for self tapes, and I'm like, been ready. Nothing has happened.
If it makes you feel any better, I've had 3.
Come on, man. I mean, yeah, I guess, but
3.
I just read a news piece.
6 months.
You're going to be on an HBO Max show or something. I mean, come on, look at you. Look at you and look at me. Look at you. I look like the before picture of what Paul Giamatti is now. When I used to get out on auditions, I was the quote unquote Steve Buscemi type. Like that is what it would say on breakdowns. Steve Buscemi type.
You're like, and I got this one. I got this.
I ended up interviewing him at TCA and I pretty much said, well, I guess I have to say this. It's nice to finally meet you, Dad. And he gave me a hug and it was so strange. But I guess, so leaving LA, how does that work in your mind being, I mean, you're not that far away, but you're disconnected enough from this environment. Does that help you get any clarity on acting?
I love it. Yeah, I love it. It so doesn't matter. Like all of the BS that surrounds the industry, all the parties and all the who's seen where and paparazzi and all that. I mean, like I was never affected by any of that stuff, but just being away from it, you realize how none of that stuff matters. None of that stuff matters. All that matters is getting the job and doing the work. And so when I come down to work, I'm there to work. And so I show up prepared and I'm like, I want to be done because I want to get on the last flight. I want to go home. I want to see my family. So shut up, know your lines, hit your mark, and let's do this. Let's have fun. I want to have fun in the process. Don't get me wrong. I love what I do, and I love to play on set, but like, I also want to go home. My family's somewhere else. So.
Right. And that's what I wanted to talk about because I don't know, growing up, my mom tried to get me into acting when I was a kid. And there was a company called Faces International back when I think 1989 that was this presented themselves as this big like actors management company. And if you sign up with them, they will get you headshots and an agent and all this
you had
stuff.
To pay for through them.
Yes, and they
Mm,
ended up going out of business and being sued for a lot of money for exploiting kids and their families because they up front it was some like thousands of dollars we would have had to spend to
yeah.
join. And growing up here, I'm from LA. Growing up here, it's always been constantly about entertainment, TV, movies, acting. And I started theater at a very young age. It was actually but I didn't want to, but I was the kid in class that was running lines with all the kids auditioning to be Ebenezer Scrooge for a Christmas Carol.
Hmm.
And I was the only one in class who knew all the lines. No one knew the lines right, but I had to memorize the lines because I was reading it with everyone. And even back then, I was the little grumpy Jewish kid playing the little grumpy Ebenezer Scrooge. I played Scrooge 3 different times at 3 different schools for 3 different productions
That's
of A
amazing.
Christmas Carol.
That's
But it
amazing.
was it was then that I realized it was something I loved to do, and thankfully my mom was supportive of it. But I'm curious, just to start, when did you know that this was
Well,
it?
see, I had the opposite. I mean, I loved TV. I grew up. I mean, I was raised by television practically. Watching MASH and watching reruns of old shows.
Yeah,
Uh, uh, but that was never an option. Growing up in Louisiana, that at the time, no one thought I'm going to be an actor. So that was never a thought in my head. My intent was just to do better than my mom did, and so I thought I have to be a lawyer. I can argue. My grandmother told me I could argue with the signpost. So I thought, well, I can do that. I can be a lawyer. And so that was my intent. It wasn't, I did a play and I did plays in high school, um, kind of forced into one my freshman year and then did one my sophomore year. And then I moved to this school in East Texas my junior year and they had a huge theater program. And so I kind of got thrown into that. Um, because they didn't have debate, they had theater. So I did that for 2 years and we won awards and stuff, but it never occurred to me to think of this as a career option. So it wasn't until I was in college and Aaron Eckhart was a year ahead of me and
oh.
he was getting work. He wasn't an actor yet. He was in the film program, but he would get
Oh, I
work
know.
as an
Us
actor.
Errands, we
Yeah. You model a lot.
yeah,
Yeah.
right.
You're more of a hand model though, I hear.
Mm.
That and like
Yeah,
detergent stuff.
yeah,
Yeah.
sure. Totally.
Okay.
I've
Sorry.
actually been told that my hands are super soft for a man my age, but I digress. I'm actually being serious, but it's okay. I haven't done one day of hard labor in my life.
Anyway, long story short, Aaron Eckhart was getting jobs as like the helicopter pilot. He was a model and he was getting jobs from the modeling agency as an actor for the TV movie The Week that was in town, or there were 2 TV shows that shot in Salt Lake. And I was studying theater. That was what I was doing at that point in college, and thought, well, if Aaron can get work, I can get work. So I went and got his agent
Oh,
in Salt Lake and making money doing it. And then it was like, oh, maybe I should do television, because my intent at that point was to go to college or go to grad school to do theater.
right.
Um, and at that point, I was like, well, I'm already getting paid. LA is just a couple hours that way, so I'm done with school. Let's go to LA.
Right, right. I don't know if I'm reaching here or not. You said that you didn't want to, that you were thinking of following in your mom's footsteps. Was your dad around?
No, we have that in common. My dad died when I was really young. I was like
Oh, wow.
18, 16 months old when my dad died. So I didn't have the father figure either. Both my grandfathers died before I was 15. So like
Wow.
I was like you, I had no male role model. There were guys from church that would show up periodically. And I had I had 2 stepdads, one for a very short period of time that I barely remember, and one for a couple of years. Um, but these guys from church would show up and try to be, some of them well, some of them not so well, try to be a role model. There was one guy that really was a good example to me for a couple of years in high school that I still think fondly of, but and Cliff Daniels. But otherwise, I was like you. I was figuring. So, but when I became a dad, I was like, I don't know what to do.
Yeah.
Like I don't know how to do. I literally don't know how to do this. I have no example, like good or bad. Like I don't have anyone to look. Okay, I can't do that. That sucked.
Right.
Oh, that was a good thing, or So it was. I had the same anxiety you had. The difference between us is I always wanted to be a dad. I love kids. I love playing with kids. I was the fun uncle, the funkle, and I love imagination and playing those games with kids and seeing where their minds will take them, and giving them a hard time. I love kids, but when it came to having one myself, I still am terrified. I'm constantly like, how am I screwing her up? You know, like
Well,
there's the therapy fund and the college fund. There's,
oh God, I should write that down. We have not had that conversation. My daughter is technically Jewish, kind of,
yeah,
maybe a little bit. No, I forgot we had that conversation, and
yeah.
that's the reason why I wanted to do this show, is because, looking around online, I've dabbled in writing about parenting stuff since starting this myself. And like I'm a big horror movie guy. My daughter is born, and suddenly for a good year and a half, I couldn't watch any horror movies or even The Walking Dead, which I had to cover for work. I got so affected by a scene where they were using a baby
Mm, mm.
as a lure for the zombies, and I got super pissed off. And I remember having to take a step back going, wait, this is new, why am I feeling this way? And it's those types of things that I've been exploring. But I mean, I didn't know anything about my dad aside from the fact that he was a deadbeat alcoholic, and I've learned things now that I am a father, that he was almost a member of the Hells Angels in the 70s, that
Holy
he
shit.
did porn for the Hells Angels, like biker snuff adult movie. I found him online, like I found a video. I went down a dark.
Wow.
He never graduated high school, went to prison for meth. When my mom gave birth to me, he didn't show up to the hospital at all.
Holy
And
cow.
only recently I found out that he never told my mother he loved her. And I'm like, why did you? And that's part of this, is because my grandfather was killed by a palm tree falling on the car on my grandmother's birthday in 1973. My mom,
If that wasn't a script, you'd be like, that's too much. Let's pull that back a little
well,
bit. Come on.
Pat Boone was like 17 cars back. They always love to tell me this story. It was over on Sherman Way near Sepulveda, where all the palm trees are. It was a windy
Yeah, yeah,
day.
yeah.
And my grandfather, who was a milkman for Carnation in the 60s and 70s, was driving my grandmother to a surprise birthday party, and a palm tree fell over and landed on the car, killed him, put her in the hospital for 6 months. The reason I'm sharing that is because I point to that as basically the reason why I'm here.
Hmm.
Because I don't think my mother would have gone on the steps gone on the road she went on and met my father otherwise, or made the decision
Ah.
to marry him, because he was so not right for her.
Is he
And
still
so
around?
he died in 2006.
Oh
I
wow.
found out after the fact that he was married 5 times, and I have half brothers and half sisters all around the country.
Wow.
It's crazy. And he was
Wow.
colorblind, and I can't tell the difference
Meaning
between.
he dated black people and white people, or
No,
he
meaning he
literally couldn't see blue.
literally couldn't see any colors. And I found out about 10 years ago, because I would always have these arguments with people of saying, that's not dark blue, that's black, or that's not turquoise, that's seafoam green. I am slightly colorblind. And having that conversation with my mom, she just randomly was like, oh yeah, your dad was colorblind. I'm like, you
Isn't that
didn't
amazing?
think to tell me this? These like little things that I have learned over the years kind of fed into this. My dad became this sort of legend in my head of like what not to do,
Mhm.
and kind of a monster in a way, with all these bad things I've heard. And I was raised constantly. My grandmother and mom raised me, and they would always tell me, you were the best thing that happened from that marriage, which is
Mm.
great. But then
Sweet,
it's
but
like,
also puts a little pressure on you.
but it also puts the thought in my head of that marriage isn't a good thing,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
fatherhood is, if my grandfather didn't make it and my dad didn't make it, and then I found out last year
This will
that
be the thing that kills you.
right, I found out last year that my great grandfather was in the Holocaust, and my
Just
uncle.
found that out. Just found that out.
I just found that out. My grandmother never really talked about her dad, and so
That was
my
that
mom didn't.
generation, though. That generation didn't talk about stuff.
No. And so like I did a press day for the TV show Hunters that's
Mhm.
on Amazon.
Yeah, yeah.
And I talked with
Nikki
the guy.
Toscano.
You're right. Yeah. I talked with the guy that created the story. This young guy named David Weil. And he and I bonded on that whole idea of legacy, and how trauma can be handed down from generation to generation. And here I am now as a father, not all I know is in my head this concept of what not to do. Like, don't go to jail, don't sell crystal meth,
I think those are good starting points.
Don't do porn for the Hells Angels,
I mean, you could stop at porn, but especially for the Hells Angels, don't do it.
And that's another thing. When I learned about that, I was driving with my mom in the car and I brought it up to her and I'm like, Mom,
did you know?
I said to her, so a guy reached out to me on Instagram who says he was my father's brother. And she said, oh, you mean Mike? And I said, yeah.
Oh my God.
And he said my father used to do adult movies in the 70s. And I'm driving and the light turns green.
Hopefully not on Sepulveda with the palm trees.
No. I'm driving, light turns green, and I look over and she's looking out the window and she goes, oh yeah, I haven't thought about that in quite some time.
God.
I'm just like, you didn't think at all that you wanted to share that info with me?
This is good backstory. Give me the information.
And this was initially I was going to write a memoir, and this turned into a podcast, which is probably going to be helping me figure out what the hell this memoir is going to be about. But my daughter, I find out my wife's pregnant, and I tailspin. I lost like 10 pounds, anxiety, not sleeping, and I was constantly thinking of, okay, well, is there this seed, this like darkness inside of me that's going to show itself? And is that going to be what my dad, am I going to basically walk the steps he walked in raising this kid? Am I cursed? Like, all these things were going through my head, and welcome to the dadward spiral. Wow. That's pretty much why we're here, because I never cared about fatherhood. I never really was into any of that. And I was jealous of my friends who were kids who had dads around, that I just didn't want to know about it. And now every day it's all I think about. Mm-hmm. So since I just unloaded all that on you, I'm wondering if you can go a bit into your experience of how becoming a father has, I guess, changed your perspective on life, or even your perspective on the work that you're doing. Because
okay, I'll tell you how it started. So my wife also had not 4 days, but she had a day and a half of labor. It was like, was it 20
hypnobirthing?
No, hell no.
We have script.
My wife.
I had a script of shit I had to.
We had a birth. We had a birth plan. I'm doing air quotes. We had a birth plan, but I was like, I don't care. Just make the kid. Get the kid out healthy and make sure my wife's okay. That's my birth plan. Everybody survives. That's my birth plan.
That's a good plan.
So, but part of the birth plan was I was going to cut the umbilical cord. So she is in labor for like 20 something hours, 30 hours or something like that. And we had been watching we had never seen The Wire all the way through. So we're finishing The Wire, and I was watching The Walking Dead. Okay. So my daughter gets stuck in the birth canal. And okay, we'll go to step back. So my wife is going to do it. She wants to do it natural. Oh, without then she's like, you know what? I need an epidural. Give me an epidural. Give me the drugs. So they had this med student puts in the epidural, and if it goes in wrong, half your body gets all the medication, the other half doesn't. Yeah. So she looks like a paralysis victim, like she's had a stroke. God. So half of her face is drooping like this, and she looks at me. She goes, "Don't be concerned." But I don't think I can breathe if I lie down on my own. And I'm like, and she's a doctor, by the way. So
don't be concerned.
if she's worried about it, there's a real issue, right? So then so this goes on for like 4 hours. They have to turn it off, turn it on, turn it off, turn it on. Because if it gets too much, she can't control her diaphragm and breathe. And half of her face is drooping. And I'm like, oh my God. So finally my daughter gets stuck. And then the doctor's like, okay, look, we have to cut you. It's like, Rocky. Mick's going to cut him so he can finish the fight. And they pull my daughter out, and she had aspirated meconium, which is the really like tarish stool the kid first has.
Yeah.
And if it gets in their lungs, it could be a really bad thing. So like the doctor's like, okay, she's coming out now, get ready. And I'm like, and there's a team of people waiting on the other across the room, and they're waiting with the little suckers to go in her nose to pull all the stuff out of her lungs and stuff. And they want me to cut the umbilical cord. I'm like, I'm good. And I'm like trying to cut it, and I miss, and I cut half. And I'm like, finally, take the kid, save the kid. And then I'm torn. I'm standing there now. I'm holding my wife's hand, and they're taking my daughter away. And I looked at my wife, and she's like, I'm fine. Go to her. So I go over there, and there was this split second where time froze. Like in the movie, it would go to slow-mo, and as they're taking my daughter over to the little heating units where they warm the baby warmer, um, and they're going to do all this stuff to make sure she's okay. Everything slowed down, and I clocked everyone in the room. There were like 8 or 9 people in the room, and figured out how I could kill them if I had to get her out of that room.
Yeah.
And I've not been in fights. I'm not a fighter.
You Jason Bourned them.
I Jason Bourne the shit out of that room, and I was like, I will take that pan. I will hit that guy over the head. That guy gets a scalpel.
You know what that means? In that moment, you became a father.
Oh my God. And it's been like that. Like it's constant, like, the other thing, it's constant fear and joy and rage. And it's like all of the emotions. And I go through them almost every day. All of them.
So do I, but I mean that's just my life in general. But now it's lack of sleep and constantly afraid that civil war is about to happen outside my door.
Yeah, that's true. That too.
Are we sharing birth stories? Because I mean that sounds. I wasn't allowed to cut the umbilical cord.
They didn't trust you with the knife. That's sharp objects.
People were making decisions while I was frantically pacing. So, like I said, it was 4 days, and we were going with Kaiser. And my wife was not dealing well with the people at Kaiser. And so we had taken all these classes.
Did you have a doula?
Yes.
Oh,
we did, thankfully. We had gone with all these classes, learned about the human body and the process of pregnancy. And like we actually did hypnosis stuff, which I was surprised certain techniques we used worked. We're in this room with a few other people, and I put my wife out and then inflicted harm on her that she did not feel because of certain cues, certain things in the script I was reading. And I'm like, okay, I guess this kind of works. But first thing they don't tell you in the movies is that when your water breaks, you don't have to go to the hospital right then.
Right away, yeah.
My wife didn't tell me her water broke when we were driving in the car. And I got off the freeway and hit a bump, and she was like, and I had a feeling, but she didn't want to go back to the hospital right away because we had just left, and there was this nurse there who was just super forceful and not nice. And I guess
her name Ratchet.
It could have been. You learn that your body goes into defense mode, and even when your water breaks or whatever, and you dilate, your body goes into defense mode if you feel like you're in danger around certain people. So we came home, and it was a good 12 hours from that point where we're just at home waiting until the last possible second, which is what the hypnosis class would tell you. And at like 4:00 in the morning, we were supposed to go back to Kaiser at 8 a.m. the next day. That if she wasn't far enough along, they were going to induce.
Mm-hmm.
4:00 in the morning, my wife comes in and says, I can't do this anymore. We got to go. I called that Kaiser. They had no beds. I called another Kaiser. They had no beds available. And it was one of those things where we originally took a hospital tour back before she was, even that far along. I said, what happens when you run out of beds? And I got laughed at. And at 4:30 in the morning,
and now you're like, aha!
Yes, we drove to a Kaiser we had never been to before on Sunset Boulevard near the Church of Scientology. And it was the best experience. It was the best decision I could have made. But then from that point, she was already in labor for a good 12-ish hours maybe, and we were at that Kaiser for 3 more days, so that by the time, or 2 more days, I'm sorry, there was a full day before the water breaking. By that time that they made the decision to bypass the natural childbirth plan, I had been pacing. I was so familiar with the hospital waiting room, and at 4:30 and 5:30 in the morning, there was no one there, and I was exhausted, and I hadn't slept in like 3 days. And I remember trying to sleep on every surface in the hospital. I was trying to sleep on tables and floors and like on a chair that I didn't fit in. There was a maintenance guy that came by and gave me the weirdest look. And I finally decided I was going to try to at least get some sleep in my car. And as soon as I got down to my car, they said, "We need you up here." And they made the decision to go in and do a C-section. And at that point, I guess I came off pretty frantic that when I got down to the delivery room, the doula was in the scrubs, in the outfit that, I would have been wearing if I was to go in and cut the umbilical cord. And I remember I walked in, and at that point it was like 5:30 in the morning, and I looked at her, I'm like, "But you're," and she's all, "Yeah." Just looked at me and was like,
wow.
And I said, "No, that's a good, you're right. You're right."
Okay.
And so they left me in that waiting room, whatever the recovery room, by myself. There was no one else. I was alone in this room full of like medical equipment and a printer that would randomly print out test results of something, and just 5 or 6 recovery beds. And I was the only one in there for an hour and a half.
Please tell me you laid down on one of those beds and went to sleep.
No. At that point, I was so...
You wake up, your wife's next to you in the recovery bed. You're like, "Hi, honey."
I mean, that would have been great, but no, I was doing jumping jacks. I was running back and forth. I was playing like games on my phone. I was doing everything to try to stay calm. But at that point, I was at the crescendo of my anxiety and stress and being like, "Oh my God, this is it. I'm going to be a dad. I don't know what I'm doing. I'm going to mess up this kid's life. Am I even going to stay? Am I going to do what my dad did and bail?" Like all these things. And then I remember the doctor came in and said, "You got a pretty baby," and gave me a high five. And I'm like, "Who are you?" And all these random people were starting to come out of the room who I had never met, shaking my hand and congratulating me and giving me high fives. And I'm just like, "All right, where's my wife? Where's the kid?" And I got a picture that they took on the in the delivery room, and then that's when it hit me when they brought the baby and put her in my arms. I was like, "Oh, okay, no turning back." And it was something that just clicked in my head where I'm like, "Okay, I can be freaked out and stressed about this, but now it's my job to keep this thing alive." And that sort of knocked all of that other stuff to the side. You know what I'm saying?
Absolutely. It's the same thought. It's just that I don't know how much of that is innate for us versus, or if it's human nature, but I absolutely had that of like, this is my new job. Like, I love my wife, but there's something about that kid that everyone else comes second.
Right. Yes. And, you hear people saying, you may not like kids, but the kids aren't like the one, like your own. And I would always be like, "No, I hate children. I just hate kids." I would always be that way. I was this goth kid who just was this nihilistic view of the world, who just hated everyone. And I would never be a dad, and I can't be around kids because they're germ machines, and I'm a sympathetic vomiter. So God forbid they puke in front of me. I don't want to puke on my kid's head while I'm trying to save her. Vomiter. So like all these things. And then I got her and I'm like, okay, I get it now. She's like another arm. She's like an appendage of mine that, I mean, it's directly connected to me in this way that I never understood before.
Yeah.
I'm going to pivot this conversation because I realized you said you had it hard out and I talk a lot.
You still got
the world is a garbage fire, Kevin.
Yes, it is.
There's a lot of hate and anger and fear out there.
Yes.
And one of the things that I try very hard, I fail a lot at it, is I try to remember to be kind, and that it is such a simple concept, but it's also a commodity, kindness, nowadays. And I think social media plays a big part in that, as well as our current, the messaging that is coming down from the government and how it has disconnected a lot of people. And when I was a kid, I would go to the movies and I would see these ads, like like 3 to 5 minute videos at the beginning talking about St. Jude and donate to St. Jude's Hospital. And I grew up on food stamps. I was like wearing hand-me-down clothes that my mom would get tailored. So there'd be patches on these pants of mine that I would look like a hobo in school. And I got, picked on a lot. And there was a lot of stuff that we did not have growing up, that between that and the messaging that I would get about my father and all the chaos that would happen between my mother and grandmother, because neither one of them dealt with the trauma of the accident properly. I would see those videos and be like, well, that's great, but what about me?
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
I
Understandably.
I would get mad. I would get
Yeah.
angry. And,
Yeah.
these are kids who have cancer and stuff like this. And it would just completely bounce off my head and be like, just get to the movie already. And there's something about, I don't know, growing up and reflecting on that. And I guess understanding how trauma can affect a person, even if it didn't directly impact, like, even if I wasn't directly involved in the accident that happened. I started to realize that that was a closed-minded view, and especially nowadays with the short, kindness in short supply, the idea of involving yourself in charity feels like um you're completely taking ego out of the equation
Yeah.
and trying to, I guess, I don't want to say give back, but spread some goodwill and hope where it's needed. And I wanted to talk to you about that because now I see this stuff. And I don't know if it's because I'm a dad now, if it's because I was saying this to Devin Sawa in our last episode, that Final Destination has been on my mind a lot because now it's like I see death and danger around every fucking corner now that I have this kid.
Look
everywhere.
both ways. Look both ways. Don't touch that. That's hot.
The first time we drove in a car with her, I was on pins. Like I was driving like 25 miles per hour and a 40 mile per hour. I didn't want, I know how to drive. So I want to know how you got involved in the charity work you've done. And B, what the heck is a big slick? And C, you just finished like a celebrity golf thing. Can you talk about that?
This year was virtual. So first of all, Big Slick was started by Rob Riggle. And
okay.
it was originally a poker tournament. So the Big Slick, I think, is ace king in poker. I believe, or it's because pocket rockets is aces. So the Big Slick is a suited ace king when you're playing Hold'em poker. And so originally they started this 10 years ago, almost 11 years ago, as a charity poker tournament. And then the gaming people got in trouble. They couldn't do that. So we started playing softball. And then at this point, this was their 10th year last year. And so they're raising money for Children's Mercy Hospital in Kansas City. And it's Riggle and it's Eric Stone Street and Jason Sudeikis and Paul Rudd and I think and David Koechner are the 5 celebrity hosts. And then who
are probably all dads that you're going to text and say, "Hey, go on my friend Aaron's podcast."
I will tell them they're all they're all dads. Yes, I think they're all dads.
That is
Stone Street's not a dad.
You don't
he's
have
the
to
only
be a
one.
dad.
You don't have to
just
be that. He played a dad. He played a dad.
Yeah.
You could have you have the potential to be a father.
Right. You could be a woman who had a dad, and I would have you on the show.
I love it. Anyway, so that's their charity thing that I've been doing for about 4 or 5 years every summer. That's just a big party. It's like they get all their celebrity friends show up. We do karaoke all night, and then we bowl and we play softball and raise money for the Children's Mercy Hospital. It's just a party. It's just fun.
That's charity. Like, how does that work? How does that work to raise the money?
So people pay to come to Kauffman Stadium to watch us play before a Royals game. The Royals donate a certain amount of money that day. People pay to bowl with us for 2 rounds the Saturday morning. And then they have a big gala party where people pay for tickets. And then they have auction items, like Paul Rudd auctioned off a shield, Captain America shield signed by all the Avengers. But the key to all of these, any one of these tournaments, is to have 1 or 2 or 5 crazy rich people. Like stupid rich, meaning they have tons and tons of money. Not that the fact that they're stupid and they're rich. So crazy rich people.
I wasn't judging.
Who are going to donate, $25,000, $100,000. That's how you get up to the big numbers. But yeah, they've been doing that. This is their 10th year. Patrick Warburton does a golf tournament in Palm Springs. This was his 10th year, and they raised this last year $3.3 million over the weekend. And his is a golf tournament. It's 3 days of golf, 3 nights of music. and it's in Palm Springs. So the guy who runs that tournament, his name is Clark Rainey. Clark Rainey called me about 2 years ago and said, "Hey, we want to do an East Coast version of Patrick's tournament. We want you to be the namesake." And I was like, "Okay, so clearly you went through your Rolodex. You got to R, and I'm the first person that's going to say yes." But thank you. I would happily do that. And so last year was year one. The goal was to raise $500,000, which would have been the most ever for a first year event for St. Jude. That was his goal. My personal goal was none of my friends got arrested in Florida, that everybody got to go home. And
that's a good goal to have.
No one got arrested as far as I know. Everybody went home on time, and we raised $700,000.
Wow.
So this year the goal was to get to over $1 million. And obviously with COVID and spikes in Florida during the time, and just safety reasons, safety protocols, and also it's just not a good look for a St. Jude event to be not masked up and people all in a room together.
Right.
We decided this year we did a virtual concert. So we did 2 nights of music that normally happens at the event. We just did it online, and it was free online, but then we had some auction items, and then we had people donate some money, and we ended up raising $511,000, I think.
Wow.
Which was, anything over 2 or 3 was a coup. So yeah, we were very proud of that number. But my involvement, my connection to St. Jude, first of all, my wife worked there when she was in college.
Okay.
At the college, it was in the research part when she was getting ready to go to med school. And my personal connection is my very first TV job was a Whit Thomas production, which was Tony Thomas, which is Danny Thomas's son.
Right.
So Tony Thomas gave me my first series regular job that lasted a full 4 episodes. It was on NBC after Just Shoot Me. And it got canceled almost immediately. And it was the baby version of Arrested Development. It was Mitch Hurwitz. And Mitch Hurwitz was the writer, and Jim Valley. And they were hadn't figured out what Arrested Development was yet. So Jeffrey Tambor played my dad, Joe Kleberg played my mom. And,
wow.
And it was crazy family. And I was the Jason Bateman in the middle. And then they realized they could get Jason Bateman. And so then they made Arrested Development a couple of years later. So that was my connect. So I went to a couple of events with them. I sat at their table, and you can't watch the videos as an adult, especially as a father, and not feel something. It's like, Tony Thomas's whole thing was no child should die in the dawn of life, which is a pretty good mantra, right? They should give it a shot. And it's interesting because my wife is a pediatric heart surgeon for kids. She operates on baby hearts. And her whole thing was she operated on adults and got frustrated because she'd be like, "Okay, this is how you fix this problem. Don't eat so much meat, quit smoking, quit drinking." And they wouldn't do it. And she's like, "Well, I'm going to go operate on kids because it's not their fault." You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But yeah, and then I actually got to go to the hospital. This is about 5 years ago. I went and played in a charity tournament, one of the celebrity tournaments before the big golf tournament in Memphis, and went to go tour the hospital. And that changed everything. Going to the actual place. What's the interesting backstory for me is that Danny Thomas, when he knew he wanted to build a hospital. It's a great story about how he had kids and he was poor and he was trying to make it as an actor and a singer and a musician, and he couldn't get arrested in Hollywood. And he went to his local Catholic church and prayed to St. Jude and said, "If you help me, I promise I will build something great in your name." And I can't remember if he knew it was a hospital yet, but and he did. Like a week later, he got a big job, and all of a sudden he's famous Danny Thomas. And he went to his parish priest who had been in Memphis, and he said, "Okay, I'm going to open a children's hospital in the name of St. Jude. Where should I do it?" And he said, "Memphis." And he was like, "What? Why Memphis?" He goes, "Because they need you. Memphis needs you." And this is during segregation.
Wow.
And it was going to be free to everyone. It wasn't going to be a white hospital. It was going to be a hospital for everyone. And people thought he was crazy. And it's still there to this day. And it's obviously so much bigger than it was. Obviously they've grown so much. But the idea of when you're in that hospital, it is joyful. And I hate hospitals. I had so much death in my family. That my mom worked at a hospital. She was a nurse. I hated being around them. They just gave me, every time I was there was something bad. The smell, I don't like the smell. This place is joy and hope. I mean, imagine your daughter, they come to you like, your daughter has leukemia. And my first thought is, let's save her. And the second thought is, how the fuck am I going to pay for this?
Right. Yeah.
And they don't charge a dime for anything, for travel, for the hospital, for everything at the hospital, for lodging, for food. It is all taken care of. You never receive a bill. And can you imagine the weight that would take off?
Oh, absolutely. And I didn't know all that.
Yeah, like not a dime. Parents, families do not pay for anything.
Wow.
Yeah. So that's it started as this thing of like, I love golf. I love Clark. Let's do something good. I love St. Jude's or St. Jude. It's not St. Jude's. I get in trouble for that all the time. It's St. Jude Children's Research Hospital. So anyway, I've been schooled. But now the connection is more personal in the sense of once you've been there and what you see, when you're in that hospital, there is no color, there is no religion, everyone is equal. Everyone is just there to make sure some kid is going to be okay.
That's, yeah, I get it. I want to talk about one last thing. Mind
Please.
you, I should have said this at the beginning. We are recording this before the election, so we have no idea.
Well, when is this going to drop? Like
this is dropping on Thursday.
I feel like we have to do a record now because we're dropping something. By the way, I don't think we'll know on Thursday. So
I don't either.
I think it's going to be a while. So,
but I'm bringing that up because we're still in COVID. It's still pandemic. There's talk on the news about spikes in the virus in different places, and your wife is a surgeon. And I mean, what? She still works, right? Now, is she working
every day? Every day.
Are you segregated from her at home? How does that work?
No, she's not. Look, the reality is she's not frontline in the sense that she's not dealing with COVID patients, and the hospitals have heavy protocols. So she's not around anyone who has it, and they have contact tracing at the hospital. So if anyone that she's worked with is around anyone else that's infected, they contact trace and they let everyone know. We had one scare about 2 weeks ago. My daughter had a fever. And of course, the first thought is she has COVID.
Right. Yeah.
And then my wife started getting sick, and then I started getting sick. And luckily, because my wife works at a hospital, this was Sunday night. Monday morning, she got tested, and we knew Monday night she was COVID free. And then just out of precaution, we had my daughter tested on Tuesday, and she was COVID free. And I was seeing my doctor on Friday, so we decided there's no reason to get tested because if they have it, I have it.
Yeah.
If they don't have it, I don't have it. But it's been interesting. There was heavy lockdown early. Sacramento's has not been hit hard, luckily. I think partially because we're so close to San Francisco, which shut down so early. Partially because it's a lot of medical people in this neighborhood, in the community, and so people take it seriously. And like we had our one quarantine family for the first 2 months that they're the only people we saw. And then it's opened up. We've added people to the group at this point. The two of the girls my daughter's in kindergarten with, we had the first 2 weeks of kindergarten, they were at home on Zoom, and so we did a bubble with those two families, and we would switch houses, where they would, Zoom class together. So they had a sense of being together because really they're learning not to poke their neighbor, right? They're learning how to deal with another human being in a small space.
It's something where my daughter doesn't know how to deal with another human being. And I fear that that we're all possibly raising a generation of antisocial or awkward kids because of that.
Add social media and Zoom to that. And
right.
Yeah.
So I wanted to close this by, I don't know, asking how you're getting along. Like how are you handling the parenting at home thing, especially with all of this?
What's interesting is my wife and I, when we met, she lived in Louisiana, I lived in California, and then for 3 years she was in Loma Linda and I was in LA, which is about an hour drive, and then we had 1 year in LA together, and then the rest of the time it's been either her here, me there, or both of us here, but I travel for work, and so our whole relationship is based on distance and like having time apart. Right. Because I travel for work now. Like when I go to work, I have to get on a plane and go somewhere. And so the first 2 months, the first month was kind of like this weird mini vacation. Like this, it was like this like staycation where we're just kind of in the house. It was kind of fun. And we did tasks and we cleaned out rooms and we, rearranged things. And then like month 2, it's like, oh, this is not going away.
The honeymoon is over.
And then we made, which was in the long term is going to be a great decision, but for the last 2 months has been a terrible decision, was we decided to move during a pandemic.
Oh God.
And so we bought a different house and sold the old house. And so we had one really good fight about 2 weeks ago where I realized, oh shit, I'm the stay-at-home dad.
Yeah.
Because for the first 6 years of my daughter's life, we had to live in nanny.
Oh,
Because
wow.
we had to, because my wife's on call and I go out of town. Someone has to be in the house, especially when she's little. And our nanny left right after we moved into the new house, and she went back to LA, and so I'm it. Like I make my daughter's lunch every night. I wake her up, get her ready for school. I feed her breakfast. I take her to school. I take her to gymnastics. I take her to whatever. I'm staying home. I'm buying groceries. I'm cooking dinner. I'm cleaning the house. It's like, and I did not sign up for that. That I do not want to do this. I do not like it.
Yeah.
I want to go work. And
Yeah.
I love the time with my family.
I
But
get it.
she goes like, and she then it dawned on her. She goes, I didn't realize. And I go, yeah, I didn't either. But I'm doing it because it has to be done. But
Right.
like, this is not what I want to do. There are people who enjoy that stuff. I don't. I don't
Yeah.
like cleaning toilets. I don't. I like making dinner once a week.
Right. Yeah.
Like
This week was the first time I've ever been alone in the house with my daughter overnight. My
oh,
wife,
really?
my wife's birthday, she said the one thing I would love to do is to spend a night away so I can just have a break and a night to myself and to recharge. And what am I supposed to say? No. I'm like, it's your birthday and you have you get a lot of my daughter is 2 and
wow.
her molars are coming in
Oh wow.
and she's learning the power of no.
Oh wow.
And
I remember those days.
And the power of throwing herself on the floor, not knowing if she's going to smack her head on anything.
Love
so
it.
like, and she also doesn't like going to sleep, and I think she might be afraid of the dark.
Did you guys sleep train?
Yes, but it's been 2 steps forward, 1 step back.
That's normal.
And I've never been here by myself the whole night. And every time I put her down to bed, it's been a different situation because I guess I have a different energy than my wife.
A little bit, maybe.
I'm a little more relaxed and more like, okay. And I need to be more firm with the rules, but it turned out she slept almost all the night and I was awake the entire night because every little noise set me off like, oh
Right?
God, oh God. And so I probably slept like 2 hours and got up at 6 a.m. But it was one of those things where going in it, I didn't sign up for that. I really did have this thought in my head of like, I'm going to do this and she's going to do this. But now that, especially during this lockdown, you know,
all bets are off.
She doesn't have much work coming in. I don't have much work coming in. She's auditioning for different, audiobooks and commercials and stuff because we have an audio booth in our living room. And so we're trying to do it in shifts. But sometimes you got to improvise, and you know she needed time away. And what am I supposed to say? I go.
You say yes.
Yes. I go for drives. I go, hey, help my mom. Like I leave when I can.
Yeah.
And so it was one of those things where, of course, I say yes. If I said no, that would be a lack of equality in the household.
Mm-hmm.
Kevin, I feel like I can talk with you forever, but I know that you need to go, and also I need to go because there's a nap that's going to be ending fairly soon, and I still have some kind of work to do. But I want, I was going to talk to you about Clayton Crawford and his charities that he's doing.
Pig Out Picnic.
Yeah, and I want to get him on the shit. Like he was so cool to hang out with. You and him were sort of the first real examples I got of, hey, maybe I should get back into acting because not everyone in this city is bad. I had such a jaded perspective on the industry when I stopped acting in like 2009, but then I still got little bits here and there. So I want to thank you guys because you show me that not everyone here is just 100% focused on the last thing that they appeared in or who they know or, what they're wearing or
none
whatever.
of that matters anymore.
No, it doesn't.
None of that matters.
No, it doesn't.
Doesn't matter.
So thank you for throwing a little bit of kindness into the world. And
thank you, man.
I do really appreciate the work that you're doing.
Before you go, I will tell you the best advice that I was given.
Give it to me.
As a new dad, right? And I can't remember if it was a person told me this or if I read it in some book or something, but the idea, and this is my mantra, every time I start to lose it or I start to freak out, the mantra is you are just shepherding this human until they don't need your help anymore. So I try to stop thinking of the role of father or the role of adult child. It's like, this is a human being that I'm trying to give as much information as possible so that they can live a healthy, good life. that I'm just shepherding them through this phase where they can't wipe their butt and they have to make sure someone to brush their teeth, and they need someone to wash their clothes, and they need someone to drive them places.
Right.
But it's usually in the moments where because I was the guy who always said, I'm never going to say because I said so. That is my favorite line. I say it all the time. Oh, because you don't need to know why, because I said so, because I'm your dad. Right. And I have to remind myself, it's like, okay. Because I don't want to explain it right now doesn't mean that it's not important for her to know. Yeah. And so, that I always remember being very frustrated as a kid because no one told me why. I was very curious and wanted to know why, and wanted good intel on why, so I could argue against it. But I constantly have to bring myself back to that idea that in 10 years or 15 years, she's going to be a little adult.
Yeah.
And so I'm just trying to give her the space and the love and the support for her to become whatever that is that she'll become.
That is good advice.
That becomes my mantra. That's the thing I try to go back to.
I've been given a lot of bad advice regarding
well, don't do meth. Don't do meth.
Don't
do Hell's Angel porn.
No. Kevin,
I feel like you're already winning.
Where can people find you online if you want to?
I am at Kevin Rahm on Twitter, at Kevin P. Rahm on Instagram.
Awesome. Well, we're reaching that point in the episode where I have to say thank you all for listening. Grab that beer cozy and give it a kiss. This trip into the Dadward Spiral has come to an end, and I appreciate everyone for tuning in, listening. I appreciate you, Kevin.
Thank you.
On so many levels. But thank you for joining me. Hugs and kisses to Dragon Wagon Radio. Again, I'm Aaron Flux on Twitter. I'm Aaron W. Pruner on all the other channels. I don't TikTok, and I don't Snapchat, and I don't Twitch.
Nope.
You can find Dadward Spiral at Dadward Spiral on Twitter. I just started that profile. Dadwardspiral.com is the website that goes with this, and I'm still trying to update that. You can also find this episode and others at dragonwagonradio.com on iTunes, Spotify, iHeartRadio. I don't know, the your mom's refrigerator. I don't know. Everyone, thank you for tuning in. And I don't know, I guess to quote Bill and Ted, be excellent to one another.
Nice.
Thanks, Kevin.
My pleasure. Thank you, man.
James Baldwin once wrote, I am what time, circumstance, history have made of me, certainly. But I am also much more than that. And that's really why I wanted to start Black on Black. My name is Julian Michael. I'm a comedian, I'm a writer, I'm an educator. I do a lot of things, but really, Black on Black isn't about me. It's about sharing stories of all kinds of people from across the diaspora. And I hope that when you listen, you'll learn something, you'll enjoy, and you'll start a conversation. Check out Black on Black right here on Dragon Wagon Radio.
It's Dragon Wagon.